This is the Jump Around with Jim Rutledge, outfitted by Iron Jock, streaming live on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel.
It is the Jump Around 3.0, live from the Everlight Solar Studio. I am Jim Rutledge, and we got an exciting show today. Lots to get into, obviously. I don't know, some news. You fire your offensive coordinator as a Power 5 conference school. That does seem to, probably necessitate the entire show. Primetime Wollersheim behind the glass. And we also have Joel Stave coming up. And I said this, Ryan, before the show to friend of show, friend of station, teammate Pablo Iglesias. I said the Badgers would kill for Joel Stave right now.
The Badgers would kill. I think there were multiple lists being thrown around during the Oregon game on Saturday of quarterbacks who would have won that game. Joel Stave definitely on that list. I mean, all-time winningest quarterback in UW history.
It's either him or Scott Tolzien at the top of that list when you remove like the one-off of Russell Wilson.
I suppose Jack Cohn deserves some respect.
He does, but like Tolzien, I have a lot of respect for Tolzien.
Yeah, when you're talking about like period of time, Tolzien, yes. Stave were there for the longest.
And again, I love Cohen is right there in that mix. Hornibrook, I don't know if I'd put him as a guaranteed win.
If he's got that, if it's the Orange Bowl, then yes. Otherwise,
he was volatile.
Yes,
he was very volatile. Stave, you knew what you were going to get. And honestly, when I've said before with Braden Locke that you kind of had to budget for an interception from him every game, it honestly was something that when I used to host the show called In the Trenches with Tarek Sala and Derek Engler, they would talk about with Joel Stave. You just needed to budget for a turnover, a fumble, an interception in general. It doesn't mean he was going to do it every game, but if you kind of just assumed one was going to happen, you could kind of game plan around it. And Stave is the all-time winningest quarterback in Wisconsin history, so the Badgers knew how to win with Joel Stave, and he's the heck of a quarterback, and we're excited to talk about him, and I mean it. Even with this offense, and we don't know what it's going to look like, Ryan, going forward, but even with the air raid, I would take Stave because I don't think Braden Locke is that much more mobile than Joel Stave would have been because we're not seeing Braden really pull it and run much. He's a little squirrely in the pocket. He's got good pocket awareness. But I want to get the Braden Locke conversation out of the way before we get to the big conversation today about Phil Longo. The game we can touch on, but for me, the most important part of today's show, the Jump Around, outfitted by Iron Jock. And you can go to ironjock.com. In fact, you know what? I'm going to check right here. I got a text message of a special code from our good friend Paul at Iron Jock. So I'm going to give that to you guys right now. This starts on Thursday. So wait until Thursday to go to ironjock.com. But I'm telling you, for the first time ever, to our fans out there, a special code from our friend Paul at Iron Jock. 40% off through Cyber Monday, which is December 2nd. 40% off at ironjock.com. Use the code HOLIDAY40 for 40% off. Again, ironjock.com starting on Thursday through Cyber Monday. Use the code HOLIDAY40 for 40% off at ironjock.com. So that is a heck of a deal for my good friends at Iron Jock. And back to the quarterback situation here, Braden Locke. And Ryan, I want your thoughts on it too. It's when I watch him play, I can't even think of a comp at quarterback at Wisconsin where I have no idea what's going to happen, good or bad, when he drops back. Honestly, the play, and he was saved some embarrassment. The touchdown pass that wasn't a touchdown pass that he threw that would have given the Badgers
the left-handed pass. The left-handed pass,
yes.
The
Mahomes, if Mahomes went past the line of scrimmage and threw the ball. That was not the penalty that was called. But he was also well past. I was in the opposite end zone. I was in the touchdown club. He was going towards the student section. I was in the opposite end zone. And when he threw that, everyone around us like, there's no way he's not past the line of scrimmage. And we are 90 yards away.
Yeah.
Of field play, probably 150 yards away in actual space. And we saw it from the other side of the end zone. Now, they called a different penalty. And then we started questioning ourselves, like, well, was he? And then you show the replay. It's like, oh, no.
It's clear as day, yeah.
Yeah, clearly over the line. So the left-handed thing was neat and fine and dandy, but that's the Braden Locke experience to me, just in a nutshell. Of like, look at this cool play. Oh, not a real thing. And whether it's look at this mirage of 3 good games in the middle of the season, not really who he is. I think, and I've maintained this, Braden Locke is a valuable backup. and the Badgers are very lucky to have him as a backup quarterback at the University of Wisconsin. But he is not a starter, especially a starter who can run the air raid offense. And I know I've beaten this into the ground, but it's worth it. When Joe Thomas says it, I will repeat it. This air raid offense really needs a star quarterback. You need an elite quarterback. It could be an elite runner. It doesn't have to be all the way around, but you have to be elite at something. And you need that level of QB play to be able to run this offense. And the best quarterbacks in this offense, Mordecai can move a little bit, and Van Dyke could move more than we'll just use for Wisconsin. Van Dyke could move more than Braden Locke could. But Mordecai and Van Dyke both had very powerful arms. And Braden Locke doesn't have that either. If Braden Locke had a more powerful arm, I do think that some of the plays they wanted to run in this air raid would be more useful. But his decision-making at this point in his career is just as sporadic as it's always been. So I don't really trust him as a quarterback to be someone who is commanding the offense. You would not say that he commands the offense. You're just rolling like you're playing craps. And you can crap out or you can get craps and win. And so you just don't know what's going to happen. And so like maybe things go well against Nebraska and they get bowl eligible and then the Minnesota game can be icing on the cake. Like that's the best case scenario. And this season, honestly, to me, I would call it W. Like I think they fire their offensive coordinator, lose their starting quarterback, and have this sort of schedule.
And you lose 42-10 to two different teams.
Right. But realistically, and this is the positive note on it, Ryan, is if they win the next two games, there's not really a game on the schedule where you say they should have won that game.
No, there's not one where they should have won, but the way they lost a couple times was the most concerning aspect.
True. Well, Iowa's honestly the only game where I'm like, ugh. The other ones I still maintain it just felt like they ran out of gas.
Penn State was a good contest. They, once again, Braden Locke pick six really flipped that game. Yep. And then Oregon, what they were able to hold up against Oregon. Yeah. Oregon. Yeah. I was in the press box for this game. The PA announcer said Oregon at one point. The entire Oregon beat assemblage of team writers. Yeah. All freaked out as soon as it happened. You would have thought they dropped a swear word. Anyways, it's just the fact that Mike Trustle's defense finally showed up in a huge way against one of the best offenses in college football. And I don't know about you, but the final drive after they faked the field goal and they had, maybe 90 yards to go to just get a field goal, tie the game, go to overtime. Yeah. I had zero confidence they were going to move past the 50.
I left for 2 minutes ago. When they turned the ball back over to Oregon, I said, that's it. Ball game.
Yeah.
I left. And I didn't have a single worry. I had no worry that the Badgers were going to, that I would have missed out. Yeah. I had no worry. It was there's not a chance. Because Braden Locke, 12 of 28 for 96 yards, one touchdown, one interception. And I don't know exactly how long that pass to Vinny Anthony was.
43 yards.
43 yards. So realistically, outside of one bomb, close your eyes, throw it in the air sort of play. Braden Locke was horrendous, which makes me worried. I don't say worried because he is a true freshman and they'll be able to redshirt him. But maybe Matoyer, I honestly, if I was betting men right now, I'm betting that Van Dyke is back at quarterback next year for the Badgers or some other transfer QB.
Especially after the news that came out on Sunday.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll get to the Phil Longo stuff, but let's just look at the quarterback, setting aside the offensive coordinator. At quarterback, if you're a betting man, you're betting as a portal QB as the Badgers starter next year.
Yeah, I think you have to be aggressive in the portal this year, whether it's Van Dyke or somebody else. I would hope that they also try to target other quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks, or maybe up-and-coming guys. But yes, I don't think next year's starter is on the roster or currently healthy on the roster, I should say.
Yeah, and I'm with you on Van Dyke. I get the idea, but that's not a risk worth taking because he's coming off an injury too. And would he be ready? When is he ready? And if Matoyer is not ready to play, and this slightly changes. If let's say Matoyer is, by the time the bowl game rolls around, they feel like, you know what, or they just want to get bowl eligible and they want the vet to play, and let's say Locke has another 12 of 28 for 96 yards, but they beat Nebraska somehow. The defense brings that same performance against Nebraska that they brought against Oregon. They have a very good chance to do that. Then maybe against Minnesota where it's almost like, yes, it's senior day, but it's house money. You got bowl eligible. Who cares what bowl game you're playing in? And then they feel like Matoyer is capable enough not to embarrass himself and run the offense out there, and he plays a nice game or two before the season's out, then I have a different feeling. But if it maintains where Matoyer's not going to get a start for the rest of the year, and then you're going into the offseason with Matoyer and Locke on your roster, I would say that you definitely I would bring in a new quarterback. If you saw a little bit out of Matoyer, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say stars align and Matoyer gets in there and makes some plays and the team feels better about him, then I say, you know what, go with Van Dyke. Because we can't have a situation where we're going to a Matoyer who's completely unproven or Braden Locke, who we know exactly who he is, if Van Dyke isn't ready to start the season / gets injured again. So that's why I'm with you bringing a portal QB.
Or a really high-value 4-star recruit who was in the stands for the game as well. I want to play this one clip from Barry Alvarez on the Great Dane Huddle last night.
Okay.
He was asked about what he thought about what Carter Smith, the 4-star recruit who the Badgers are pursuing, who was at the game in the stands on Saturday. This is what Barry Alvarez had to say when asked about what he thought Carter Smith might be thinking in the stands.
But do you think that as he watched this game, it was a great opportunity for him to come and be the Wisconsin Badgers quarterback?
I don't know. Was Longo recruiting him?
That I don't know. I don't know which person was in on that.
He's a quarterback?
He's a quarterback, yeah,
Yes,
4-star.
He's a quarterback. He should put his hand up. He
Absolutely.
should put his hand up. I'm in. You got
All right.
everything but a quarterback.
And honestly, that's funny you were going to play that because that was my positive spin on it, is that any quarterback looking here says, I can come in and play.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot, and whoever the offensive coordinator is, they need a lot of depth at quarterback.
Yeah, if you're doing the NCAA recruiting thing, A+ playing time available.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Wisconsin Badgers.
Yeah, big positive. Spin it that way.
Yeah. So let's, before we get to the offense, let's talk about winning. The offense hasn't won a lot, but winners go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison, $1.1 million won just last weekend. That means Friday, Saturday, Sunday, won at Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. Go be a winner and go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. All right, so Luke Fickell fires Phil Longo. I was in the car coming back from Soldier Field, and I actually received this via text, courtesy of the ESPN Madison group text, because I am not on Twitter on my phone anymore. I will use the browser, so Blue Sky still catching up, and Threads still catching up as far as a news source there. You can follow me on Threads or Blue Sky. Threads is Jim Rutledge, and Blue Sky is like JR ESPN. No, flip it around. Blue Sky is Jim Rutledge, and Threads is like JR ESPN if you want to follow me for some Badgers. And honestly, just mostly Badgers and Bears content is what you're going to find on there. But the news came through. I was non-pulsed. I didn't even have much of a reaction to it as far as oh, wow, I can't believe they did this. Because I believe there was at least a little rumblings that Phil Longo going after one season wasn't impossible, and the way the season was going, it seemed impossible for him to stay around after this year. So moving off now makes me feel like maybe something happened in there that the Longo, this is just speculation, the Longo Fickell personal relationship just reached a head. Because Longo had the comment early in the year about, I'm just here to do what Coach Fickell asked me to do, and they both have egos and earned egos. So I'm intrigued to see what will happen for the rest of the year. But I'll be honest, even getting bowl eligible seems less important to me now than just figuring out this offensive coordinator thing. I'm not saying I don't want, I will not be upset if they're not bowl eligible. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that I do think that the Badgers figuring out the coordinator position is number one this offseason for the entire trajectory of the program.
I mean, it's honestly the most important thing, probably starting today. I mean, Luke Fickell at his press conference yesterday kept re-emphasizing that he was focused really just on this Nebraska game, but for him and his program going forward, he and Chris McIntosh, they have to hit a slam dunk on this coaching hire as offensive coordinator, because this one, the first one, was a massive mistake at this point.
And I want to get to that in a minute, and we're going to be joined by Joel Stave in about 10 minutes here. But I want to get to the idea of who's calling plays for the rest of the year. But let's hear from Luke Fickell. He had an exchange with the great Jim Polzine about the importance of an official play caller. And I'll tell you right now, before we even play this, collaborative effort is such a red flag to me. But we'll give Luke Fickell the benefit of the doubt that he was just trying to protect someone. Let's hear from Luke Fickell.
I think this is sort of a Nebraska question, and you not admitting who's going to call plays makes it more difficult. But how do you sell to your players that this is the best chance to get them to win a game on Saturday?
I'm not sure what you mean by how do I sell to
Well,
my players. That
Because you don't have
they
a
don't
lot
know
of
who's
guys on
calling
your
the plays?
No, you don't have a lot of guys on your staff that have play calling experience. So assuming somebody that's doing it
So
is not.
how much homework have we all like? There's a bunch of guys that have play calling experience. I'm not sure. I got some play calling experience. I did the
Offensive.
5th grade, 7th grade, right out of college there for a little while. Sometimes I think we do get it overblown. Like, well, who's the guy calling? Look, I called it for. I don't want to get into this, but I called it for a lot of years as a defensive guy at Ohio State when nobody really knew who was calling the play, who was calling the defense. Well, I don't know. Does it matter, right? I mean, we had a bunch of co-coordinators. We had, so and speak, who was, we didn't get involved in it. Every time I was asked at a press conference, hey, by the way, who calls the defense? Why does that matter?
You can tell he's irritated. It's not the best year for Luke Fickell. Not the best 2 years for Luke Fickell. It matters. He knows it matters. I know for a fact Jim Polzin is not looking for someone to blame when it comes around. There's no blame for whoever's calling the plays outside of the blame on Coach Fickell. Like, that is one thing for sure, is there's no blame to be had on that outside of the blame on Luke Fickell. It does look like multiple people are reporting that Nate Letton, the tight ends coach, who replaced Gino Guidelli, who was here for like 2 weeks. Guidugli.
We'll get into him later.
Yes, Guidugli was here for a little bit, and then he went to Notre Dame to be the quarterbacks coach, I think passing game coordinator as well. And Nate Letton stepped in and has been tight ends coach for a little bit now, and he's from Cincinnati, so maybe we see some slight changes in this offense. Cincinnati's offense resembles more of what we would see if you watched Notre Dame play this year. Like, it's a little bit more of that power spread is the way I describe it. That's a little bit more like what Ohio State ran as well. It's what I really, and we'll get into the names in a minute, really want to see from the Badgers going forward with the new offensive coordinator. But let's hear from Barry Alvarez, and then we'll talk about some options for offensive coordinator for the Wisconsin Badgers. So, how much time and effort and process and how in-depth is that hiring process that you've gone through when you've hired your coaches?
Yeah, you know what? A good athletic director always has a short list that you could go to at any time. If something happens, if you have a crisis, boom, something happens, and you have to make a decision, that you have a pecking, or you have 3 or 4 people that you're ready to go hire. And it's obvious that Mac had a list, before he made a decision on Paul, that he had a list of people that he was going to go after or had contacted prior to see if they were interested in the job. And there's no one hotter in the country than Luke.
And Barry Alvarez has talked about having a list before, and I guarantee Luke Fickell has a list, and that's what I want to get into, is a list of people who I think might be on the list. Some of these I put out, but Ryan might have some as well. We can talk through some of these, the positives and negatives, but more importantly, what I really want to talk about is why they're on the list, more than like, will they be good? Because let's be honest, we don't know. We have no idea. Let's just be completely honest. We don't know what is a good offensive coordinator as far as a play caller. Some have more resumes than other. The thing that I'm looking for, Ryan, and the most important thing for me is I don't want the air raid here. I don't think the air raid works at a school like Wisconsin. I don't think you can recruit the athletes fully to run it. I think you can recruit good athletes, and I also don't think you can. And this has to do with the money. Like, it's a lot of money, and the most amount of money is going to be spent on paying the skill position players.
Yep.
So if you have to pay quarterbacks and wide receivers, and then figure out running backs, like, there's a budget here you have to figure out. So there's that part of it, let alone your own recruiting base in the Midwest. You're recruiting against Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan for the top skill players. You're not really going to pull people from California. The weather is a factor. That's lower on the list, but like wind, cold,
there's a lot
rainy,
of factors.
But the Ohio State offense, the Notre Dame offense, which I think you would describe as a power spread offense. In fact, I was actually texting with a former Badger. I didn't clear it if I could say them by name, so I will not. But I will say I sent him this text when we were talking about what the Badgers should be doing on offense, and he emphatically agreed with me on it. So it's basically this is what I Googled, and the Google AI gave me this. So Notre Dame Fighting Irish offense under head coach, or excuse me, that's not head coach though, but offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock. And this is how they described it, and this is what I want here, Ryan. Zone read concepts. The offense will run more zone read concepts at quarterback, design runs, and plays out of the backfield. Pushing the ball vertically. This offense will push the ball vertically down the field in the pass game. Simplicity. Denbrock emphasizes simplicity and avoids overthinking schemes in short yardage or red zone situations. Manipulating formations. The offense will manipulate formations and create matchups to get players involved using motion. The offense will use motion to create different matchups. Now, I'm a little bit of I wouldn't call it an armchair expert as well as say, because the Bears, the team that I follow in the NFL, just switched offensive coordinators to former Badger running back coach Thomas Brown, who was here for a year. What did he do? He's tightened up formations. They run a lot less formations against the Packers than they did prior weeks. They basically ran an offense very similar to the Packers. They ran a lot of motion. It, does get you maybe some angles, does put the defense on their heels. It also shows your quarterback if they're in zone or man. Make their life a little easier. It does cause some confusion with the defense because if you're running a bunch of plays out of a few formations, they don't know what's coming. And then the other part of it is, I think is important, is this vertical. And the Ohio State offense, the way that people described it was, I think Justin Fields described, it's like, look deep. It's like deep, middle, short, run. And that's it. Like it's simple in how it's executed. If your guy wins off the line and he's open deep, let it deep. And there's someone going deep every play. And if that's not there, you quickly drop your eyes to the check down or you run. And I think but then more importantly, Ohio State's turned out a lot of great running backs in college to the pros. I think that power spread would work wonders here at Wisconsin. Let's get to the offensive coordinators.
All right, so these are the lists that I came up with based off of all the lists that have come out in the last 24 hours because everyone wants to know who's going to be the next offensive coordinator. Top of that list was actually the guy you mentioned just now, Mike Denbrock, offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. I think it's a resounding yes if they can make that happen, the Badgers.
I would say Luke Fickell likely has to take a pay cut. But yes, if they can get Denbrock, I don't know why he leaves Notre Dame for Wisconsin.
He's also the highest paid offensive coordinator in college football, reportedly.
I think Luke Fickell would have to give up some of his salary.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he'd leave, and if he did leave, it'd be for money. And I also don't know, not this is that important, he's not going to be here that long if he succeeds the way we want him to. Like if he's going,
always true.
So that's the other part of it. So I don't hate it. I would be into it, but it's it's a 2-year solution because either in 2 years everyone's fired or in 2 years he's gone to be a head coach. And I'm not saying you have to hire someone forever. I just don't think the money will work. And why in the world would you leave Notre Dame for Wisconsin? I love the Badgers, but I don't know why you'd do it.
All right, I'll throw out another name who might leave Notre Dame for Wisconsin, and that's who you mentioned before, Gino Guidugli, who was at one point the tight ends coach for the Badgers for about a month before leaving to become the quarterback coach at Notre Dame with his former co-worker, Marcus Freeman. Would you want him as a Badgers offensive coordinator?
And he's got ties to Cincinnati. He was Luke Fickell's offensive coordinator at Cincinnati for a little bit as well.
He served under Fickell from 2017 until he left.
Yes.
He came with initially in that first wave.
Yes, and he's a young offensive coordinator. You could sell yourself as an up-and-comer. I mean, if his resume is, OC at Cincinnati, QB coach / passing game coordinator at Notre Dame, that's a resume that I could buy into. And I think he's obviously far more affordable, but that's not the most important part. That's a resume I can buy into. I like their offenses. He's got play calling experience, and he's around smart offensive minds. If we like Denbrock and we can't pull him away from Notre Dame, if you pull away his understudy, that's one I at least can get excited about. Like that one, I don't hate that one. It seems like where are you on that one?
I would feel okay with it. It wouldn't wow me. I'm kind of hoping for the wow hire, but that's also what we did with Phil Longo. Yeah. So maybe it's better to go safer. I'm not totally sure. But I'll go a little different with this one. Now reaching far back in Luke Fickell's experience. In 2014, he worked with then Ohio State offensive coordinator Tom Herman. Went on to become Texas's head coach and was fired as FAU's head coach on Monday.
Yep.
Your alma mater.
Yes.
What was your experience with the Tom Herman era at FAU?
I think Tom Herman falls into the Paul Chryst category. Now, don't freak out. Great offensive mind, great offensive coordinator, not a great head coach. And I think that's where he falls. I don't think he's past his prime as a play caller. FAU, love the school. They do not have the athletes or the ability to be able to get. But the nice thing would be he's coached at Texas, Ohio State, and FAU, which means he should have inroads in recruiting at all those schools. And depending on what Fickell allows him to do, could build an entire staff.
True.
Because his offensive coordinator at FAU was actually at Ohio State as well. The name escapes me, but he was at. He's not a. I looked at the name. I said I don't want to put him down as an offensive coordinator candidate because I'd rather one of these other guys. But he's someone that has Ohio State ties with Fickell and Herman that again could come up and be the like a QB coach or he's also an offensive line coach. So like,
okay.
I'm not saying they need to clean house, but a guy like Herman comes in with his own staff, a recruiting base, because again, Texas, Ohio State, and then in Florida was recruiting. He'd check those boxes.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'll switch over to, speaking of offensive linemen, head coach Jason Eck, currently of the Idaho Vandals. Now, this is a guy, Badgers football alumni, played offensive line. Also played with current Badgers assistant offensive line coach Casey Roebuck during his time with the Badgers. And like you said, he runs a traditional running scheme, essentially, like similar to what the Badgers probably would have ran back in the day. But he throws in some of the spread formations that also create space in defenses.
I like this hire. Weirdly, Idaho head coach to Wisconsin OC does make sense. The only thing is the Rybach connection is not enough for making me feel like it's really going to happen. I know Tauscher loves this guy too, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying that if I was a betting man, I'm betting on someone who has more direct ties to Luke Fickell, especially because Longo didn't work out, and there was not truly a direct connect there with Fickell.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would love them to look at him and consider him, but I still am leaning on someone that Fickell has a personal relationship with already.
Any other names you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I put some out on social media that I think are interesting here. Let me just pull up my tweet. The one was Stan Drayton, who was a running backs coach at Ohio State for a few years, been a running back coach with the Chicago Bears, was an assistant with the Packers for a year, just got let go, weirdly, almost like the same day that I think Longo was fired as OC. Drayton was fired as head coach at Temple. So Stan Drayton, former head coach at Temple, just let go, was at Ohio State with Fickell, and has coached in the NFL with the Packers and the Bears, and played college ball as a running back too. He could be an interesting hire. And then the other one, and I'm curious about this one, is Corey Dennis. Corey Dennis is, I believe, the what would you call it? The son-in-law of Urban Meyer. And he was at Ohio State until recently. I think he only overlapped with Fickell a little bit, but was at Ohio State until recently. But I would imagine Fickell's got a good relationship with Urban Meyer, so he might get a good recommendation on this. But Dennis is at Tulsa. The team is not winning at Tulsa, but they have had, like if you look at some of their offensive numbers, pretty, nothing to sneeze at. I would put other players in front of him, but I don't hate the idea of Corey Dennis. Let me tell you about Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb, and then we'll get to Joel Stave after the break here. You're only minutes away from a better buying experience at Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb. That is a customized buying experience at Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb. Joel Stave joins us next.
Staying on top of our game is one of the hardest things to do. At Game Day Men's Health, we specialize in testosterone replacement therapy, weight loss, erectile dysfunction, and wellness. Proven to increase energy, build muscle, improve mood, and boost sex drive. Get started now and book your free consultation and testing. You'll get test results back in minutes, and we'll create a plan to optimize your health. Game Day Men's Health. Book your free consultation today.
And now we are thrilled to be joined by former Badger quarterback Joel Stave. And Joel, thanks for hopping on. And it might be bittersweet for you because I think with each passing year, people are more and more longing for the days of Joel Stave back at Wisconsin playing quarterback. How have you been, and what's it like for you as a former player watching this air raid offense at the University of Wisconsin and seeing some of these quarterbacks struggle with an offense that's designed to really allow the quarterback to cook?
Well, I've been good. Spending a lot of time just at work and my family and kids and stuff. So life is good.
Good.
But it's been fun following the Badgers. It's been a little different, I guess you could say, than the football that I grew up watching, and then the football that I played for the last, that I played for 5 years when I was there. I think there's some good, some maybe not so good. One of the challenges, I think, to playing quarterback at Wisconsin when I was there is, as a passer, it can be really difficult to get into a rhythm when you are so run heavy. Obviously, on the flip side of that, we had some really, really strong run games when I was there. And we had some of the best backs in the country. We had some of the best offensive lines in the country. So we were able to move the ball effectively on offense. We were able to score a lot of points. And it feels like it's been a little tougher to consistently find offensive production for the offense in the style that they've been running over the last 2 years.
And I want to get back to the Badger program, but you mentioned about finding the rhythm and having some great running backs. Last Friday, and then Melvin Gordon was honored at the Oregon game, 10-year anniversary of rushing for 408 yards in 3 quarters against Nebraska. Hard to find a rhythm in that game. You were 7 of 11 for 46 yards and a touchdown, but you didn't have to do anything except for hand it off to Melvin. So what are your memories of that game and the performance that Melvin put on in that Nebraska game? Because that had to be fun just to take in.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable game. I know I had one important throw that game. When we were down 17-3, we had a 3rd and long that we converted to Jordan Frederick on the right side, right in front of our bench. And that was about it. That was about it for my day. Besides that, turned around and handed it to Melvin. I remember shortly after that, he had one of the most amazing runs I've ever seen where, like, without breaking stride, he hurdled a guy right in front of our sidelines, went and scored. And from there, it was unbelievable. It was like almost like Nebraska knew what we were calling and lined up in the perfect defense to let us have success. It was fun to be a part of.
It almost was like a movie. I was in the press box for that game, and I think he, tapped the record going into the end zone, student section. The jump around is coming up. There's snow coming down. I mean, honestly, I was turning to people. I'm like, is this real? I mean, did you guys at some point realize that like a record was happening during that game?
To be honest, I didn't. I knew he was having an amazing game, but that season, that was our 11th game of the year, and it felt like every game he ran for 190 to 250 yards. So it kind of felt like another one of those games. Mm-hmm. Up on the scoreboard at the time, it would show the stats, and it wasn't really until I looked up midway through the 3rd quarter, and it's like, holy smokes, he's got like 350 yards.
Right, yeah.
That you realize that something special was happening. But yeah, everything about that night, the environment was unbelievable. You had, like you said, the snow falling. It was really an important game for us in the conference and on the for the Big Ten West to be able to put ourselves in position to go to the Big Ten championship game. And it was just, it all kind of culminated at the jump around point where Melvin had just broke the record. The snow was falling. Everybody was excited. It was really a high point in my career.
And, actually Melvin was saying that, and Coach Alvarez we had on last week, and they both talked about that bowl game, the Outback Bowl, that you guys won with a game-winning kick, 34-31. A lot of pride on the line at that point against the SEC. That was Melvin's favorite game. It was one of Barry's favorite games to coach. What were your memories? Because you got to go out on a win there. I mean, that's a heck of a way to go out. You got the win. You got the win against an SEC school. Really an impressive way to end an impressive career.
Yeah, it was. That was a cool one to see. I remember some of the noise going into that week was, oh, well, Melvin Gordon can do it against the Big Ten, but he can't run against the SEC. Yeah. And he went out for, 250, 260 yards, whatever it was.
251
and proved that he was, it really was a shame that he didn't win the Heisman that year. I think without a doubt he was the best player in the country. He was the most impactful player in the country, and he had the most historic season. Mariota won it that year, and no discredit to him. But it felt like every year there's a quarterback throwing for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, and there's not a running back going for 2,000 plus yards and impacting the game that he was impacting the game on a week in and week out basis, like Melvin was that year. So it was a shame to not see him win the Heisman, but that was an awesome way to send him out, to send Barry out, and a lot of the guys who made that possible, Rob Havenstein and Kyle Costigan, some of these senior offensive linemen who, really cleared the way for him to run the way he did that season.
Yeah, 2,587 yards, 29 touchdowns on the ground, 32 overall. The part that blows my mind, Joel, with that, and you're right. I mean, if Melvin wins the Heisman, I think, and Ron Dayne is amazing. I think there's no question that people are putting Melvin Gordon in the Ron Dayne category of like greatest running back of all time at Wisconsin, right there with Ron. And I think people still do, but that Heisman is something that would have done it. But he averaged 7.5 yards per carry that season, Joel. And that actually was below his career average of 7.8 yards per carry. I mean, for a running back in a Power 5 conference that averaged nearly 8 yards per carry is something that I think is just too easily forgotten.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he wasn't just your everyday feed him the ball 35 times a game and he pounds away for 100 plus yards. Like as a freshman, we were giving him jet sweeps and he was taking those to the end zone. But even that year, like everyone was keying on, okay, how do you stop the Badgers? You stop Melvin Gordon, and nobody could do it. And I think that's a credit not only to him, but to everyone on the offense, the wide receivers making blocks downfield, the tight ends, the fullback, the offensive line, everybody doing their job. But when everybody knows that you're going to feed this guy the ball and he can still average 7.5 yards per carry and 7.8 over the course of his career, that's a pretty incredible stat. I didn't realize it was that much, so that's cool.
Well, and then again, an incredible stat that I think people forget. And you're 31-10 as a starter at the University of Wisconsin, and you weren't along for the ride. You obviously made throws, you made plays, you knew how to win, and that's incredibly impressive, Joel. But also, you had to go through what these players are likely going to have to go through again, at least on offense, with Phil Longo being replaced, and obviously a coaching change. A lot with name and likeness and transfer portal. A lot of these players are already pretty new to the program, so the head coach change isn't maybe as new as it was 2 years ago for the Badgers. But Phil Longo and switching offensive coordinators, and obviously you dealt with that when the coaching staff was switched. What happens? Because forget in season, that's going to be hard enough. But even just going into the off season of having a new coach, maybe a slightly different scheme, like what's that like for the players?
It's a challenge. It was my freshman year, sophomore year, and senior year. We had different offensive coordinators each of those 3 years, and the biggest challenge is going into spring ball. You're not really able to do any self-scout. You can't go back to your film from the previous year and learn on that and grow on that because you spend the whole offseason watching somebody else's film to learn that offensive coordinator's offense. So, my first season before my redshirt freshman year, we were watching Northern Illinois film to get ready for Matt Canada's offense. The following year, we were watching San Diego State to get ready for Andy Ludwig. Yep. 2 years later, we were watching Pitt with Coach Chris coming back. So, that's 3 of your 4 off seasons where throughout the winter and throughout spring ball, it's really nice to be able to build on what you did the year before. And it makes it really tough when kind of what you did the year before is gone and you're on to something new. So that's the challenge that these guys are going to be up against, is for all the returning players. It's take what you can from the season, learn from it, but understand that, terminology, verbiage, reads, everything that you kind of learned and grew on throughout the year in game situations is going to be different. And that's not just for the quarterback, that's for everybody. Everybody's got to learn new terminology, new formations, motions, shifts, protections. And there's a lot that comes along with that just to have productive practices so people know where to be, and to be in the right spot and to do the right thing.
The Badgers have 2 games left. You are well aware of the rivalry with Nebraska and Minnesota. It honestly is an opportunity for the Badgers to, I wouldn't say turn around their season, but if they win these 2 games, you look at the schedule and you go, honestly, if you're picking it, the games they lost, not shocked that they lost. They were pretty top-end teams. These 2 teams fall closer to the category of the teams like Rutgers and others that the Badgers have beaten this year. With Nebraska on the road and Wisconsin at home, you got senior day left. And then you just lost your offensive coordinator. How do you suggest, or how do you think these players are handling the emotions of the rivalry game, the emotions of losing their offensive coordinator, and the pressure of staying bowl eligible?
Yeah, I think they got a lot to rally around at this point in the year. You never want to lose to these 2 teams. You never want to lose to Nebraska, and certainly not to Minnesota, not at home, not on senior day. So there's challenges, there's distractions, there always is. Defensively, I think you got a ton to be really proud of on what they did on Saturday against Oregon. You got a lot of good players still. So, while there is distractions, while there's challenges, I think emotionally they should be able to kind of rally around, the seniors, hopefully Coach Fickell and the rest of the staff, and really hit it hard these last 2 weeks to, like you said, remaining bowl eligible is a big deal. That's not only all of your bowl practices, but, that keeps the streak alive. There's a lot that comes along with that. So I think it's important.
And then with Braden Locke, obviously not the season he wants to have. Turnovers, missed throws, things like that. But every game is a new opportunity to kind of turn around the narrative on you. And it really does come down to the old Raiders just win, baby. The Braden Locke, like if you had a chance to chat with him, what are you saying to a guy who's, I think, maligned a little bit right now by the fans? He's had some good games. He's had some rough games. Like, how does he bounce back and finish out this season the way that he wants to?
I think the big thing is do everything you can to ignore the noise. Focus on focus on what you can control. It's been a tough year. There's certainly been some high points. There's obviously been some low points too. He's played a tough schedule, played some really good teams, and they've played him tough. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of positive out there, a lot of good things that he's done that gets very easily overshadowed by the negative, especially in losses. Whenever there's a loss, the light goes on the quarterback and, kind of shows some of the deficiencies. And you can lose some of the positive things that maybe happen throughout the game, throughout the season. So I think he does have a lot of positive things to be able to draw back on. But really it's ignoring anything that's not focused on the team, on your prep for the week, on, winning these last 2 football games, trying to ignore that and just focus on what's important. And it's a lot easier said than done, but trying to have fun with it, like when you play your best football, when you're having fun. And, if I could talk to a 20-year-old version of myself, I'd say the same thing. It's a lot easier said than done, though. So I hope he can get there.
Before we let you go here, Coach Fickell, we don't need to there's a little bit of controversy because basically he was asked who's going to call plays, and he said, why does it matter? And then said it'll be a collaborative effort. It does look like there will be a singular play caller, but 2 parts. One, what do you think collaborative means in this situation where I'm guessing it means collaborative in a game plan, but someone's actually going to be calling the plays on game day. But then how important, you've worked with a few different play callers, how important is it for that play caller to be in tune, and how difficult, and you kind of touched on it before, how difficult it is to get in tune with the offense in this sort of 2-week window there? Because I do think there's an art to play calling. You tell me if you agree.
I do agree. I think it's really trying to get into a rhythm of the game, getting a feel for what the defense is going to do and trying to stay a step ahead. I think from a collaborative standpoint, you obviously have people who are a little more in tune with the pass game and people who are a little more in tune with the run game. I remember even my redshirt year when Russell Wilson was the quarterback, and I was on the headset with Coach Christ, Coach Bostad, Coach Rudolph, and Coach Christ was real dialed into the pass game. But there would be times where, he's got a run coming up and he would just say, hey, Coach Bo, what do you like? And Coach Bostad would call the run game. So I think there is some collaboration that happens between, play callers depending on their specialty and potentially like offensive line coach if they're calling run game and stuff like that. So I would hope they can all lean on each other's expertise in the offensive staff room, because it's obviously going to be different. Whoever's calling plays is calling them for the first time, at least for Wisconsin, and there's a challenge to that, and there is an effort of trying to get into a rhythm that comes along with being a play caller.
Joel, thank you so much for the time. I know you got to get out, so we appreciate you making a window for us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. That is a Badger legend there in Joel Stave. We actually had someone pop in on Twitter, and Douglas Greenberg said Joel Stave, one of the most underrated QBs ever, all class and left it all on the field. I echo that. Thanks to Joel Stave for joining the show. Great insight from him. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back. Wisconsin On Demand, Apple, Spotify, any of those great places. Just look up the Jump Around. We're also, again, on the YouTube stream, ESPN Madison's YouTube. Our next YouTube live broadcast will be Kelly Sheffield Show coming up North and South in Verona tonight, 6 to 7. Jim, Matt, and Molly will be on before that, so make sure to follow up and watch Jim, Matt, and Molly, and watch Kelly Sheffield Show live from North and South in Verona. The fun starts at 4 o'clock. Kelly Sheffield starts at 6 o'clock. This has been the Jump Around 3.0.